What if mixing cement with epoxy resin could create a $1 million idea? Hi, I'm Dan. Welcome back to Dan Fix. Cement is known for strength. Epoxy is known for finish. But what happens when you combine them together in one controlled project? The result might surprise you more than you expect. Today we're going to transform these two broken plastic basins into something completely different. At first glance, they look completely useless. Cracked edges, scratches, damaged surfaces everywhere. Most people would throw them away immediately. But if you look closely, the shape itself is still extremely useful. And that's exactly what matters in projects like this. So now I begin removing all the extra plastic sections that we no longer need. After trimming everything down, the sanding process begins. Long, smooth passes around the rim, back and forth. At first, the surface still feels rough under the fingertips, but slowly it becomes cleaner and smoother. And honestly, preparation quality affects almost everything later. A rough mold creates defects. Uneven edges create alignment problems. So the cleaner the mold is, now the more premium the final result will feel. Now let's create the support structure. For this part, I'm using a PVC pipe around 34 to 48 millimeters in diameter, large enough to support weight properly without flexing under pressure. The pipe gets measured carefully and slowly cut using an angle grinder. This cut needs to stay straight because even a small alignment problem becomes very noticeable later. Once finished, the pipe gets secured temporarily using hot glue. And before moving forward, stability always needs to be checked first. A weak support structure can completely ruin mold alignment once the concrete weight starts pressing downward later. Now we move to the drain section. I'm using a PVC reducer fitting here. The smaller tapered section gets removed first. Then the basin is flipped upside down and carefully centered before hot glue seals everything into position. And honestly, alignment matters a lot here. If the drain opening sits slightly off center, the final sink immediately looks less professional. Now the entire basin gets fixed onto the tabletop. Hot glue is applied generously around the outer edge where the basin touches the surface. The goal is preventing leaks. Even a tiny opening can allow the concrete mixture to escape later during pouring. Now let's prepare the second basin. The drainage holes underneath need to disappear completely. So the cutting wheel slowly follows the bottom edge to create a cleaner circular shape. Then sandpaper smooths the cut area again. At this stage, the two basins already begin functioning like a real casting mold system. One creates the outer shape, The other creates the inner cavity. Now, both molds get coated with a thin layer of waste oil. This oil acts like a release barrier between the concrete and the plastic mold. Without it, demolding later becomes extremely difficult. But too much oil creates another problem. Heavy oil buildup can damage surface quality and leave imperfections behind. So balance matters here, just enough to coat the surface evenly. Now the outer basin gets secured using screws, while hot glue seals the remaining gaps around the edges. At this point, the mold system finally feels solid and ready. Now, let's prepare the concrete mixture. For reinforcement, I'm using fiberglass fibers. These fibers create a microscopic reinforcement network inside the concrete and help distribute stress more evenly across the structure. Now, I carefully weigh exactly 100 grams. Too little reinforcement won't help much. Too much makes the mixture difficult to work with. Next comes the white cement. I'm using about 2 kilograms here. And honestly, white cement creates a cleaner and more premium finish once epoxy is applied later. Now the fiberglass fibers get mixed thoroughly into the dry cement first, slow folding motions, breaking apart the fiber clumps evenly. If the fibers stay grouped together, weak zones can appear inside the structure. Now we prepare the liquid mixture. Water gets combined with a small amount of PVA glue, just enough to improve bonding and slightly reduce porosity inside the concrete. Too much glue can affect curing behavior, so balance matters again. Now everything gets combined together slowly. At first, the mixture still feels rough and dry. Large clumps form around the edges, so we continue mixing while adding small amounts of liquid little by little, back and forth, crushing the dry pockets carefully. You can actually feel the texture changing as the mixture becomes smoother and heavier. Now the consistency finally looks correct, dense enough to hold shape, but still fluid enough to pour properly. And now comes one of the most important stages in the entire project: pouring the mold. The mixture gets poured slowly into the gap between the two basins. Then we begin tapping the mold gently from different directions. This process helps trapped air bubbles rise upward before the concrete hardens. And honestly, tiny air bubbles create bigger problems than most people expect. They reduce structural strength and create visible surface holes later. One full week later, the concrete has finally cured enough for demolding. The screws come out first. But even with oil applied earlier, the mold still refuses to separate easily. That's exactly why mold preparation matters so much. So now boiling water gets used to slightly expand the plastic basins. Slowly, the mold begins loosening. And finally, the concrete sink releases completely. At this stage, the project still looks rough and unfinished. But this is where the real transformation begins. Now I start trimming the rough edges using a utility knife. Then the sanding process begins again. Long, smooth movements across the concrete surface. Dust slowly covers the table while the texture becomes softer and cleaner with every pass. And honestly, sanding completely changes the final quality. Rushing here usually leaves scratches and uneven surfaces that become extremely visible once epoxy is applied later. By the way, where are you watching from today? And have any of you experimented with concrete or epoxy projects before? I always enjoy learning new techniques from other DIY builders around the world. Now it's finally time for the epoxy. This part completely changes the personality of the project. I'm using a two-part epoxy system with component A and component B. For this project, I'm choosing a 50-50 ratio to help speed up curing slightly. But too much hardener can make the epoxy cure too quickly and become difficult to apply. Now, color pigment gets added into the mixture. And honestly, this stage becomes completely personal. Some people prefer dark stone textures, others like marble effects or metallic finishes. That's one of the best things about handmade projects like this. Every piece becomes unique. And now, we need to move quickly before curing begins. The brush glides across the concrete surface while the epoxy instantly deepens the texture and color underneath. And honestly, this transformation is always satisfying to watch. The dull concrete suddenly starts looking smoother, richer, and dramatically more premium. Epoxy does much more than simply create shine. It also creates a waterproof protective layer that helps seal the surface against moisture and stains. That's why epoxy is used in countertops, industrial flooring furniture, and many other projects requiring durability and water resistance. Now the entire sink slowly develops a glossy, reflective finish. And finally, the project is complete. What started as two damaged plastic basins has now become a completely custom concrete epoxy sink made by hand. And honestly, that's one of the things I enjoy most about projects like this. You're not simply buying another product from a store, you're creating something unique, something personal, something that reflects your own style and craftsmanship. The final result feels strong, waterproof, durable, and surprisingly premium compared to how inexpensive the raw materials actually were. If you enjoyed this project, let me know where you're watching from and share your own concrete or epoxy ideas in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe because there are still many more useful DIY projects coming soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.